Well, well, well. Here we are. It is time for another episode of Arcana Unearthed. So thank you very much for joining me on this afternoon. If you are joining me live, then I hope you're having a wonderful lunch break. For those of you that are new to Arcana Unearthed, this is a show that we put out now every Monday afternoon at around a lunchtime, wherein we're going to go through the latest Unearthed Arcana material from Wizards of the Coast as they've put it out. This is playtest packet number 7. I have my highlighted notes here. And today we're going to go through the repurposed, the updated subclasses of the fighter class as they appear in playtest material 7. Which has gone live. It went live about 10 days ago or so, and you can find the link to that in the episode description if you did want to follow along, but I am going to bring it up on my screen in a moment. And also, crucially, the feedback survey for that does open on, what date is it now? Later this week, I think Thursday or Friday, the 21st of September. So if you want to give your feedback, then you can do so through that there. But I'll be giving my own take on some of the things here. There's some good stuff to look into and a lot to get into. So let's jump right in as we start by looking at the Battle Master subclass. So for those that are not familiar with the Battle Master, if you're fairly new to Dungeons & Dragons and looking at this new updated version with great interest, the Battle Masters are students of the art of battle. Learning martial techniques passed down through generations, the most accomplished Battle Masters are well-rounded figures who combine their carefully honed combat skills with academic study in the fields of history, theory, and the arts. Now, to me, the Battle Master fighter seems to be, personally, the quintessential fighter. They are the ones that get most of the goodies as it comes to maneuvers, which we'll come to shortly. But here are the headlines as presented in the design note for the Battle Master updates, which have been updated since the 2014 Player's Handbook. They haven't yet released. This is the first release of the Battle Master subclass that they have released as part of what was formerly known as 1D&D and now is just the new Player's Handbook playtest material for the new Player's Handbook coming out in 2024 to celebrate not only the 50th anniversary, I believe, of Dungeons & Dragons, but also the 10th anniversary of 5th edition. So, the headlines are, Student of War will now also give you proficiency in a skill. And we are going to go through some of these in more detail and look at the wording of these, so bear with me. Know Your Enemy now allows you to know a creature's damage resistances, immunities, and vulnerabilities as a bonus action. And Relentless now allows you to use a maneuver once per turn without expending a superiority die. But that free maneuver uses a D8. Which will become a little bit clearer as we go through. I had to scratch my head on that a little bit for a while. Again, if you're not familiar with the Battle Master, one of the key aspects of the Battle Master fighter is this idea of maneuvers. They're like special moves that cost what are referred to as superiority dice. Now, these are an interesting resource that the Battle Master fighter gets. They get a number of dice, which varies and grows as they level up. I can't quite remember how many it is. I think it will come to that in a moment. There are a resource that also come in the form of dice, a bit like a hit dice does, wherein you roll the hit dice to determine how much you heal, but equally that resource has other functions such as determining your maximum hit points as well. So superiority dice are a little bit like that. They're a resource that a Battle Master fighter can tap into in order to utilize some extra moves and extra abilities and things. So let's get right into it. We start obviously with combat superiority, which really actually remains exactly the same as it appears in the 2014 Player's Handbook. You learn your 3 different maneuvers of your choice as you hit level 3, and you also get to learn 2 additional maneuvers of your choice when you reach fighter level 7, 10, and 15 and each time you learn new maneuvers, you can also replace one maneuver that you know with a different one. And then obviously there's the superiority dice here. You start with 4, which are d8s, and you expend one of those dice when you use it, just like you would hit dice during a short rest. And you regain all of the expended superiority dice when you finish either a short rest or a long rest. And you gain additional superiority dice when you reach level 7, so 5 in total, and 15, where you get 6 in total. Saving throws. If a maneuver requires a saving throw, the DC equals 8 plus your proficiency bonus, plus your strength or dexterity modifier, your choice. So again, that has remained exactly the same. There's no changes to how combat superiority and superiority dice work. Now, level 3, Student of War. Now, obviously, this is one of the changes that is in the headline for the Battlemaster updates as we saw them. So, what you're looking at here, I'll read actually as it appears in the 2014 Player's Handbook, just so you can really see the difference. This is Student of War. In the 2014 Player's Handbook, it reads thusly. At 3rd level, you gain proficiency with one type of artisan's tools of your choice. That's it. Now, as you can see here, as it was mentioned in the headlines, the design notes, you gain the artisan's tools of your choice, but you also gain proficiency with one skill of your choice from the skills available to fighters at level 1, which I think is pretty neat. It kind of makes the Student of War thing feel a little bit more effective, shall we say, because tools proficiencies are a strange feature of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I understand where they're going from, but it's kind of, tools proficiencies feel like a rule that people forget about quite easily. So the fact that this skills proficiency comes in kind of makes this Student of War feature, which aside from your superiority dice is the only thing you get at level 3 for Battlemaster, it makes that feel a little bit more important. And also, this idea of being a Student of War, I mean, yes, it does make sense that not only are you going to have use of some skills, but also you're going to have use of some extra... it makes sense that you're going to have use of extra tools, but also that you are going to have trained yourself in extra skills, which is kind of implied in the flavour of what a Battlemaster is anyway. So then we go to level 7 is the next time you unlock a feature, and you unlock the Know Your Enemy feature. Now, there have been a few changes to this. Some I like, some I don't like. So I'm going to go through slowly this particular feature, because this is one of the more complex changes that has been made across all of these subclasses, which is kind of hidden. They don't really touch on it in detail in the updates, so it'd be interesting to know what people think about this. So, starting at 7th level, this is in the 2014 Player's Handbook, if you spend at least 1 minute observing or interacting with another creature outside of combat, you can learn certain information about its capabilities compared to your own. Now, this is interesting because this has been dramatically changed, because now it's not an outside of combat feature at all. It's now a bonus action, so not even a minute of time. It's a bonus action now. You can then discern the strengths and weaknesses of a creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself. So it doesn't even need to be somebody that you've interacted with or anything like that. It's just a creature within 30 feet of you. As a bonus action, you can basically analyze them, which I actually really, really like. I like the Know Your Enemy subclass feature for the Battlemaster, but it feels like one of those things that, because it takes a minute to use, I don't know if it's one that really gets played all that often and utilized all that often, which is a shame, because I think it's a really cool idea, this idea of the Battlemaster just analyzing their enemy and how their enemy behaves and how their enemy moves about. So that's change number 1. So then we have, which really is the core change of this here, which is instead of the list of characteristics that appeared in the 2014 Player's Handbook, which were strength score, dexterity score, constitution score, armor class, current hit points, total class levels, if any, and fighter class levels, if any, that's what you used to be able to determine from Know Your Enemy. Instead now, what you can determine is whether or not the creature has any damage immunities, resistances, or vulnerabilities. And if the creature has any, you also know what they are. Which feels somewhat like a little bit of a nerf. Because with Know Your Enemy before, you got to kind of choose 2 of those from that list. But I also think that actually this much more limited list feels much more crucial and much more important, because quite often I find that in a combat, from a DM's perspective, it's not the strength score or the dexterity score or the constitution score that catches anybody off guard, even the current hit points, which would require a minute of observing to get. The crucial things are often the immunities, resistances, and vulnerabilities, because those are the things that allow not only the fighter, but the other characters to strategize, because there can be many times where a creature catches the party off guard because they've got a resistance or even an immunity to something, which can really change the game. The classic example, of course, is like a werewolf who has immunities to weapon damage of piercing, bludgeoning, slashing damage, that from non-magical weapons. Now, obviously, that's an obvious one because most people know of werewolf folklore. But if they didn't, that would catch them off guard dramatically, particularly if they haven't come in prepared. So it's normally those immunities, resistances, and vulnerabilities that can shape a combat. So whilst it feels like a nerf in some respects, I actually think this is a dramatic improvement, particularly when you combine it with the bonus action rather than it taking a minute. Now, there's another change here that I don't particularly like. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. It's certainly, I don't think it's a positive for fighter players, certainly. Which is, once you use this feature, you now can't do so again until you finish a long rest. Which is fine, I understand. I think maybe a short rest might be more appropriate, because I don't know if this is particularly, for a level 7 feature, I don't know if once per day is a little bit stingy. Particularly given the fact that you don't unlock more uses of Know Your Enemy as you level up, which I think might be a little bit of an oversight on the part of Wizards of the Coast there, but they are the game designers. I am not a game designer, so this is just my opinion for whatever it's worth. So at the moment, you can only use it once per day until you finish a long rest, which I think they could be a little bit more generous than that. However, there is a kind of loophole with that, which is this next bit. So you get one use before a long rest, but they have I think they have gauged that the once per day thing is probably a little bit stingy, as I've just said. So what they have done is that they have said, well, actually, instead of taking a short rest or whatever, you can do it again, but it's going to cost you one of those superiority dice. One of those 4 that you would have. Actually, no, I think you get 5 from level 7. Yeah, one of 5 from level 7. So you get to use it multiple times, but it's going to be instead of utilizing a maneuver, which I think is a good move. I do like when the game design of 5th edition taps more into resource management than just, you can rest up now. So actually, despite what I have said about the long rest thing, I do actually think that this is probably a better solution than short rests. So, yes, the long rest thing on its own feels like a bit of a stingy offering. When you actually combine the long rest and utilizing the superiority dice, I think that's pretty good. So, overall, then, I would actually say that Know Your Enemy is a vast improvement on what it was before, and far, far more useful. So then at level 10, your superiority die becomes a D10. And now this is important here for the relentless thing. So relentless before, basically, it's very much changed now. So before, starting at 15th level, when you roll initiative and have no superiority dice remaining, you regain one. That's how it was in 2014, which I think was a nice option. Now they've changed it, though. So again, this is still level 15. Once per turn, when you use a maneuver, you can roll a d8 and use the number rolled instead of expending a superiority die, which had me scratching my head for a moment because I was like, but why would you do that? Well, that's because your superiority die has been upgraded to a d10 at level 10. So instead, what this gives you is an option to not spend a superiority die, of which now you have 6 in total, but instead roll a d8 rather than a d10. Now, I don't know how I feel about this, if I'm honest, as a feature, because, I mean, yes, it's very much an improvement on... actually, I don't know if it is an improvement. It's an improvement for the player. I don't know if it is an improvement for resource management. Which I have just said only a minute ago that I really enjoy resource management as a core aspect of D&D, just generally, not even specifically 5th edition. It seems to me like rolling a d8 instead of a d10. I mean, maths is not my strong point, admittedly. Somebody else can work out the probability of that. But it seems like a pretty low reduction in probability. I mean, yes, okay, sure, you're losing the top 2. You can only roll a maximum of an 8 now rather than a 10 on whatever maneuver you're doing. But in terms of average rolls, I mean, if we take the median average, that 5 becomes a 4. So you're only probably on average losing 1 point. That to me seems far too generous of a thing, so that they basically then have, as far as I can tell from what I'm reading, infinite superiority dice, so long as they're willing to take that average down from 5 to 4. Yes, this is a level 15 feature, but I would rather see them say, well, actually, you can use your maneuver, but actually, you're going to halve the result of whatever you roll. That, to me, seems better, because then it's not based on the average, it's based upon just halving what you've got. So this seems a little bit too generous, but by all means, let them halve, kind of so it works in the same way as like a vulnerability or a resistance, should I say. Just halve the amount. I think that would be, because it just seems too generous for me. So that's a thumbs down from me, which actually I kind of put that at middling before, but actually no, I think it's a thumbs down. So then obviously ultimate combat superiority, where level 18 you get your superiority die becomes a d12. That's not actually changed, they've just separated it out from the superiority dice section, which, hang on, where is it? Improved combat superiority. Before, they kind of wrapped up the D12 at level 18 and the D10 into the same class feature. They've just separated it out, which I think makes more sense. It makes it easier to skim and see what your progression is. But actually, mechanically, there's no real change. So that's it in terms of the actual Battlemaster subclass itself. But there is more in so much as the maneuver options, which are really the meat and potatoes of the Battlemaster class as it appears. So we're going to cover some of these maneuvers as well. A lot of them, in fact most of them, are unchanged. There are some new ones, well, semi-new ones that have been brought over from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which I will read out because some people are less familiar with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I know I certainly am. You know, most options that get played are from the core rulebooks rather than the the supplementary ones, such as Xanathar's Guide to Everything and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, etc., etc. So I will cover those because they're moving over now to the core rules, so they'll become more familiar to people. But then there are also some changes, such as Commander's Strike no longer uses a bonus action, and again, we'll get into these in more detail in a moment. Disarming attack, distracting strike, goading attack, maneuvering attack, menacing attack, and precision attack now work with any type of attack roll. That's fairly straightforward in so much as rather than it being specifically a weapon attack roll, it's just any attack roll now. So that's fairly simple. We probably won't cover those in any more detail than that. So obviously that works for things like unarmed strikes and things like that. Evasive footwork now lasts until the end of your turn, not when you stop moving. Again, we'll cover that in more detail. A lunging attack has been changed quite dramatically. It lets you take the dash action as a bonus action, and then adds the superiority die if you hit a creature after moving at least 10 feet in a straight line. Parry now allows you to add your strength or dexterity modifier to the damage reduction. Precision attack now triggers from missing an attack roll, not before you know if the attack hit or not. Rally now uses a choice of intelligence, wisdom, or charisma when determining the amount of temporary hit points gained. And then we have another new one with tactical assessment from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything as well. So that's the rundown of kind of like the headlines for the maneuvers, but I want to go through with some of these with a bit more of a fine-tooth comb. So first of all, let's have a look at Ambush, which has been brought over from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So when you make a dexterity, stealth check, or an initiative roll, you can spend 1 superiority die and add the die roll, provided you don't have the incapacitated condition. Pretty cool. That's functional both outside of combat and within, so I do quite like that. The more utility we can provide to a fighter in or outside of combat, I think is always great, always welcome. And also, you know, there are so many times where the fighter is the one who absolutely just blows the cover of a party who are trying to stealth sneakily through because they happen to wear clunky armor. So this is definitely a welcome one with utilizing the superiority die there. And obviously the initiative roll as well makes for some good flavor too. So it's functional both in and out of combat, which again is always welcome. Bait and switch, also from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, is now included. So when you're within 5 feet of a creature on your turn, you can expend 1 superiority die and switch places with that creature. It doesn't have to be a friendly, provided that you spend at least 5 feet of movement and the creature is willing. Oh, okay, maybe it does need to be friendly. The creature is willing and doesn't have the incapacitated condition. This movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, also very cool. Roll the superiority die. Until the start of your next turn, you or the other creature gains a bonus to AC equal to the number rolled. I like this. Again, it's one of those cool things providing more utility, and I very much welcome, and I'm seeing a lot of this in the rules updates that are coming out. I always welcome these moves that are being made in order to open up the battlefield a little bit more, because one of the common criticisms that does come up in 5th edition is this idea that, unfortunately, a lot of combat does just get stuck, and it gets stuck with things, people walking together, doing the attacks, and then and then they just keep hitting each other until somebody dies. Things like this just open things up, move things around, allows 2 creatures to just switch position and maybe face a different opponent without triggering any attacks of opportunity. I'm kind of in my mind imagining the kind of 2 back-to-back people fighting an enemy in front of them, and they just kind of duck and switch, and I think that's very cinematic. So a welcome addition to the core rules. Now, Commander Strike. This one has changed a little bit, not massively, but a little bit. Commander Strike. So Commander Strike, as it existed in the 2014 Player's Handbook, read thusly. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of your attacks and use a bonus action to direct one of your companions to strike. When you do so, choose a friendly creature you can see or hear and expend one superiority die. That creature can immediately use its reaction to make one weapon attack, adding the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Fairly straightforward. So now, as it has changed, as it reads now, when you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace... so, interestingly... Oh, hang on. That's not how it read in my 2014 Player's Handbook. I'm bringing up D&D Beyond, and they seem to have made some tweaks. The errata on D&D Beyond. So let me just see here how it read in the actual 2014 Player's Handbook rather than the latest errata, because I don't always trust it. The 2014 Player's Handbook read for Commander Strike read as... Oh, hang on. No, it did. When you say... Why have I highlighted that? Oh, I think I know why. Because I think they may have... No, hang on. What's going on here? Something about... I've got myself confused with my notes. I've managed to confuse myself. Anyway, so it now reads thusly. When you take an attack action on your turn, you can replace one of your attacks to direct one of your companions to strike. Which I think they could use... Oh, that's right. I've understand my notes now. So, previously, when you made the attack action, you then spend your bonus action to then utilize the commander's strike. Now how it works instead is that it's just simply part of your attack action, which is obviously an improvement for the player and the fighter themselves. So you can replace one of your attacks, because with the attack action as a fighter now, you'll probably get multiple attacks as opposed to it being like bonus actions, etc. You can replace one of your attacks to direct one of your companions to strike. When you do so, choose a willing creature you can see or hear you, who can see or hear you, and expend one superiority die. That kind of stays the same. That creature can immediately use its reaction to make one attack with a weapon or an armed strike, adding the superiority die to the attack's damage roll on the hit. This looks as though this has changed slightly, but it looks as though it was actually changed in the errata rather than necessarily. I see I've confused myself again with my notes again here. Maybe I missed something. That doesn't actually seem to... I thought there was a change on the reaction. I was going through this earlier. I must not have had enough caffeine. For some reason, I thought in my head that the Commander Strike didn't expend a reaction for the acting ally, but actually it does. So that's actually not changed at all. So really, the only change to Commander Strike is actually about the bonus action being no longer a cost to the fighter in question. So that's fine. So then obviously there's evasive footwork. Now this is a nice little maneuver anyway, as it appears in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So as it appears there, when you move, you can expend one superiority die, rolling the die, and adding the number rolled to your AC until you stop moving, which is very cool. I like that as a feature, this idea of just being very, very quick on your feet and being able to dodge out of the way. So adding that to your AC. What they had before was that it would change when you stopped moving, and it would kind of undo itself, shall we say, once you stop moving, which is nice, and I understand why they went with that, because this idea of evasive footwork kind of implies that you should be continue moving, but instead they've changed it until the end of your turn, which from a gameplay perspective, not necessarily from a flavour perspective, makes things a lot easier to manage, a lot easier to track, creates less argument, so it's a nice quality of life improvement rather than necessarily a big overhaul of something. So that's nice. Then we have Fainting Attack and Goading Attack. They remain pretty much unchanged aside from goading attack now working with any type of attack roll. Now, lunging attack has been completely overhauled, which I think they kind of did it a little bit of a disservice in the update headlines, the design notes. So lunging attack in the 2014 Player's Handbook basically increased the reach of an attack by 5 feet. And then you added the superiority dice roll to the attack's damage roll, which is nice. It's very, very cool. And I kind of understand from a flavor perspective, it works quite well. But I think I definitely prefer this. So lunging attack before was tied to when you made a weapon attack, and then you expended that superiority dice to increase the reach and the damage done. This is what it does now. As a bonus action, you can expend 1 superiority die and take the dash action. If you move at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before hitting with a melee attack as part of the attack action on this turn, you can add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Now, I think this is pretty cool. It gives an opportunity to do a dash as a bonus action rather than a full action, and then an attack. It's that thing where it kind of breaks up that thing again of like 2 people just coming together and beating the hell out of each other until one of them dies. It kind of breaks that up and allows things to move around. Now, unfortunately, obviously, that dash could provoke an attack of opportunity, but it actually feels more flavorful. Even though the lunge and increasing the reach felt right, adding the dash action as a bonus action kind of eliminates the need for that added reach, I guess, aside from the opportunity attacks. I prefer this. I'm sure there are some people that are like, no, I'd rather take the extra reach than risk an attack of opportunity. But I like this more. I'd be interested. Do let me know in the comments what you prefer, the increased reach or the dash as a bonus action, because I think this is probably going to be one of the more controversial ones of the changes that have been made. So parry then has also been changed, but only slightly. When another creature, this is how it appeared in the 2014 Player's Handbook. When another creature damages you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to expend 1 superiority die and reduce the damage by the number you roll on your superiority die plus your dexterity modifier. Now, whereas it's changed, is only in one very small, simple thing, is that it is now your strength or dexterity modifier, and you get to choose when you use the parry maneuver. This is obviously an improvement because you have dex-built fighters and strength-based fighters as well. So this is undeniably an improvement, and makes parry just as useful to the great axe swinging fighter as the rapier wielding fighter, for example. So undeniably a good improvement there. And then we have precision attack. Now this has been a very simple change. So as it worked before, precision attack, when you make a weapon attack roll against a creature, you can expend 1 superiority die to add it to the roll. You can use this maneuver before or after making the attack roll, but before any effects of the attack are applied. Now, where they've changed the precision attack for this is that this time it triggers when you miss with an attack roll. It's the same thing otherwise, it's just the trigger has changed. So when you miss with an attack roll, you expend 1 superiority die, roll that die and add it to the attack roll, potentially causing it to hit. Now, I like this. I think it makes for a much better flow of the game of like, roll to hit. Okay, unfortunately, that missed. But does it? Because I'm going to roll my superiority dice and add that on. Okay, go ahead. Okay, and now that hits, roll for damage. It just creates a much nicer flow of, like, roll for damage, and then go, am I going to use my precision? Yes, I will. The flow of it is just so much nicer, I think. And I think will be a big improvement on precision attack at the game table. So again, a very, very welcome change. The next change we have is on Rally. Now, this one I'm not too sure on whether I like or not. So as it played out in the 2014 Player's Handbook, On your turn, you can use a bonus action and expend 1 superiority die to bolster the resolve of one of your companions. When you do so, choose a friendly creature who can see or hear you. That creature gains temporary hit points equal to the superiority die roll plus your charisma modifier, which makes total sense because the idea is that you are rallying this ally, encouraging them to push on, whether that be because you believe in their capabilities or just because the enemy's on the back foot, that kind of thing. This rally now works exactly the same, except you will notice now that you get to choose either your intelligence, your wisdom, or your charisma modifier. Which seems to me all too generous. Because basically you get to choose one of half of your stats. Which just seems somewhat redundant because A, you're going to be choosing the same one every time. And B, half? Like, sure, charisma or wisdom, fine. But I really struggle to justify why these should be 3. Basically, all of your non-physical, so shall we say, your mental stats can be applied here. Just seems a little bit too heavy-handed from a design perspective. Pick 1 or 2, not 3. Like, that's just too much for me from a dungeon master's perspective. Like, one of the things that I am getting frustrated about with these updates is that player choices seem to not be mattering. Like, this idea of being able to swap things out every time you level up, being able to just choose... I mean, you may as well just say, well, actually, you choose your anything but strength or dex at this point. Like, why not add constitution to the list as well? Like, because obviously they're going for the lower of the stats, because intelligence, wisdom, or charisma presumably is going to be on the lower end. But it's just like, well, can we just make it so that when you create your character, actually the one you try and put it in is actually important? Like, if you are going to be somebody that's going to use rally, charisma modifier, obviously, if that's kind of what you have in mind. Of course, I understand the argument as well of, like, new players, etc. But these things are important, I think. And if we diminish the importance of these choices as to where to put the numbers on your character sheet when you're making your character, to me, it diminishes the whole point of having a character in the first place. Which may be a little bit strong, I don't know, and I'm sure there will be people that disagree with me. But it's too generous. Make it charisma or wisdom or charisma or intelligence, not all 3 of them. So that's it in terms of the maneuver updates, which I think for the most part are very, very good. And in terms of the maneuver updates as well, that also is all of it for the Battlemaster. So my conclusion for the Battlemaster, I mean, I'm looking at my notes here, and most of it is highlighted in blue, which for me this is an improvement. This I like. There are a couple of things that are in pink or red, which is bad. And a couple of things in orange, but mostly blue. So Battlemaster, a big thumbs up from me. Some things I'm not particularly happy with, particularly, actually the Commander Strike, the red stuff actually was moot point. So actually we're looking at good to middling with some things. So yeah, well done, WotC team. Good job on the Battlemaster front. Now, obviously, next that comes up in the playtest material is the Brawler, but we actually covered that in last week's episode. So if you wanted to find out more about the Brawler, do check that one out on the channel. Which reminds me, actually, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, I would really be grateful if you could hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon, because we're going to be putting episodes out of this every week, so it helps you to not miss a beat, and also do make sure as well that you smash that like button. It'd be really nice to hit the 30 mark. I've said that for a few weeks now, but it'd be really, really good to hit that 30 mark on the likes, because it helps to appease the algorithm gods, helps to put the word out about this channel, and and everything that we do here. So the next up that comes up on the playtest material is the Brawler, but as I say, we did cover that last week. So we're going to jump instead to the Champion, which is, as far as subclasses go, much more simple compared to the Battlemaster subclass. So for those not familiar with the Champion as a subclass, a champion focuses on the development of martial prowess in the relentless pursuit of victory. Champions combine rigorous training with physical excellence to deal devastating blows, withstand peril, and garner glory. Whether in athletic contests or bloody battle, champions strive for the crown of the victor. Now, I think the Champion was the only subclass that was released previously as part of the playtest material, so some of these changes actually relate more to that update than necessarily the 2014 Player's Handbook. But I didn't cover the Champion on this channel at that point because we weren't doing Arcana Unearthed at that point, or were we, actually? No, I think we did. Oh, it's been so long. More caffeine. But anyway, here are the key changes to the Champion since the last playtest. Remarkable Athlete replaces Adaptable Victor and moves to level 3. It now grants advantage on initiative rolls and strength athletic checks, in addition to increasing long jump distance. Now, Remarkable Athlete is actually in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So obviously this Adaptable Victor was something that they bought in for the last playtest material and have now got rid of to bring back Remarkable Athlete. Again, we'll cover that in more detail in a moment. And then Heroic Warrior now gives Heroic Advantage, which is basically inspiration, at the start of each of your turns in combat. Again, we will cover these in a little bit more detail. But the Champion is fairly simple as a subclass. It just makes the fighter more fightery, essentially. As opposed to the Battlemaster, which brings in maneuvers, the Champion just kind of doubles down on the core fighter class. So at level 3, you get improved critical. This remains the same. Your attack rolls with weapons and unarmed strikes can score a critical hit on a roll of a 19 or a 20. Very nice. Then we have Remarkable Athlete. Now, as this read in the 2014 Player's Handbook, starting at 7th level in the 2014 Player's Handbook, so it's been moved down, you can add half your proficiency bonus, round up, to any strength, dexterity, or constitution check that you make that doesn't already use your proficiency bonus. In addition, when you make a running long jump, the distance you can cover increases by a number of feet equal to your strength modifier. So that last bit about the jump distance, that remains unchanged. But actually this first bit is very different. So now, thanks to your athleticism, you have advantage on initiative rolls and strengths athletics checks. Now this is middling for me. I think obviously because I've moved it down to 3rd level, they've kind of had to nerf it a little bit. So in that respect, I understand it, and I think it's a good choice. But obviously it is a nerf, which never goes down well with fighter players. I'm a forever DM, so I'm not particularly overly invested. But I think some people might see this as a negative. But I think it's also been balanced out with the advantage on initiative rolls. Now, I don't know whether that is a little bit too generous for a level 3 feature, because advantage, we all know, particularly us that have been playing this game for a long time, is initiative. The initiative order can make or break a combat. Certainly we like boss fights and things like that. There's been many times that I was really hoping that opening salvo from the boss monster was going to really put the party in a bit of a mess, which was going to then kind of dictate the tone of the combat entirely, only for that monster to come last in the initiative order, not get a look in, and then basically be on the back foot for the entirety of the encounter, which may even only last one more round, particularly if you've got a well-prepared party. So I don't know if advantage on initiative rolls is going to be a little bit too generous for level 3. I would probably say pop it at like level well, I suppose you can't because they've kind of unified the class progression. But I think, yeah, to me it just feels a little bit too generous. I'm sure the fighter players will disagree with me on that, but we'll see. Then at level 7 you get an additional fighting style as before. You get to choose another fighting style feat of your choice. And again, fighting styles have now been moved away from necessarily being in the class proper and moved over to feats, with the prerequisite being that they are for fighters and I think rangers as well, possibly. I can't quite remember on that. But yes, they've been moved over to the feats now. Then at level 10, Heroic Warrior, which has been updated. Updated compared to the last playtest material, but actually it's a new feature when compared for the 2014 Player's Handbook. So, the thrill of battle drives you toward victory. During combat, you can give yourself heroic advantage whenever you start your turn without it. Now, I really, really, really like the efforts that they are making to bring inspiration into the game proper. I think I've said this on some other episodes as well. Folding inspiration as a core mechanic, not just one that kind of comes into play if the dungeon master remembers it, because frankly, I always forget about inspiration. Aside from every now and then, it kind of feels a little bit unfair if I'm kind of inconsistent with when I give out inspiration and when I don't. So I like the fact that they are building inspiration now into very much the core of some of these class features and spells, etc. Level 10, getting advantage on every turn, really feels too much. Like, it feels far too much for level 10. Of course, the kind of caveat here is if you only get it if you start your turn without it, but that basically means that every round of combat you're going to be able to make a roll with advantage. Plus you've rolled with advantage on your initiative rolls. Like, it just seems too generous for me. I mean, I suppose the good thing is you also you can't stack advantage, so it's kind of got limited power in that respect. But I don't know, it just feels a little bit too generous for me. That being said, on the flip side, I equally understand that the champion doesn't actually get much in terms of game-changing features. So maybe it balances out in that respect. But on a mathematical level, that seems too generous. But for the fighter players, I'm sure particularly the champion players are, very, very pleased, because this is obviously quite the boon. For them. Level 15, superior critical remains the same. Now critical hits on an 18 or a 20. Survivor now has been tweaked slightly. It basically remains the same, except it's been given another feature, which is this Defy Death feature, which gives you advantage on death saving throws. Moreover, when you roll 18 to 20 on a death save, you gain the benefit of rolling a 20 on a death save. So really, much of what the champion does, aside from the remarkable athlete, in fact, no, the remarkable athlete is the same. Basically, the champion is, you're going to hit more often with a critical hit, and you're going to hit more often anyway, because here have advantage for absolutely everything. The champion is now the advantage subclass, which... okay, cool. I mean, the idea, I suppose, is that their prowess is much greater than anybody else. Like, you don't want to be the fighter that keeps missing. Like, that is a sucky situation to be in, and I suppose the champion makes it so that the idea is the champion is such a good fighter that really, if anybody's going to hit anything, it's going to be the champion. And then, obviously, with the Defy Death as well, this idea of being able to just keep going is very much... I really like the Defy Death feature as a feature that's been brought in. I think it really does feed into the flavour of it. So I don't know, actually. Maybe I'm talking myself out of this idea of the heroic warrior being too generous with the heroic advantage at every turn. Maybe I'm talking myself out of it. Because, yeah, I mean, sure, it's an extra hit. Possibly. Because advantage is no guarantee either, I suppose. Yeah, I'm kind of talking myself out of it. I do quite like the champion. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm saying it out loud. I do quite like the champion. When you think about the flavour of it, and this absolute beast of a fighter. The best. You know, champion in every respect. Not only a champion, you know, sending forth your champion to battle on your behalf, but also champion fighter, champion in the gladiatorial coliseums or the fighting pits. Like, they are the best fighter. Yeah. I've talked myself out of it. I really like it. I really do like it. Okay. So that's the champion done. Again, really nice and simple. Then we've got the Eldritch Knight. Now, I'm going to say this now. The Eldritch Knight, the changes that they've made, generally speaking, not so great. Not a huge fan here. The changes that have been made to the Eldritch Knight, the headlines here. Spellcasting contains no School of Magic restrictions after level 3 in the subclass, which I actually think is an improvement. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the spellcasting side of things, because we mostly know the spellcasting rules. We've covered them enough times on this show. So I'm not going to go through that in that level of detail. But essentially, as it stands currently in the 2014 Player's Handbook, any spells that an Eldritch Knight, which by the way is, for those not familiar, an Eldritch Knight is basically a fighter with magical abilities. They are able to cast spells as well as fighting, like a war mage kind of idea, except different because war mage is a different thing. But you know what I mean. The magical knight, right? And so the limitations in the 2014 Player's Handbook is that you were limited to abjuration and evocation schools of magic for your spells, and that was across the board. Now what they're doing instead is actually saying, okay, well, your first spells that you choose are going to be limited to abjuration and evocation, but after that, once you've chosen those spells, every time you then learn additional spells, that's going to actually open up the other schools of magic for you as well, which I think is cool. I think it makes sense. The restrictions, to me, early on make sense, but I think once you get to that point of experimenting with your magic, you're going to be able to tap into other schools of magic. So it makes sense to me in that respect. Also, the other change is that the fighter can now change cantrip when gaining a level, and the fighter can use an arcane focus. And now again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on actually how spellcasting works in 5th edition, because we've covered it enough and we kind of know it by now. But I've already mentioned in this episode my frustration with this design decision to allow player characters to go back on the decisions that they have made. For a number of reasons. One, because I think these decisions, like, you always hear about good dungeon mastering is making sure that the player's actions have consequences, that both good and ill. You know, that idea that if they go and save the town, that those player characters are going to be looked at as heroes. There's going to be stories written about them, statues erected of them, etc., etc. That's really cool, positive. But equally, good dungeon mastering, arguably, could be made the other way as well. The negative stuff. Like, you've given 2 plot hooks, 2 quest hooks. You take one, but you ignore the other. Well, those villains that you chose not to stop are not just going to be sitting on their hands waiting for a band of heroes to come and stop them. No, they're going to be moving their plans forward. So this verisimilitude of consequences to actions, or actions having consequences. And I think that should apply also to character creation and character building and character growth. So there's that aspect, but also the other aspect is, how do you justify I don't understand how you can justify from a flavor perspective. It just talk about breaking verisimilitude and breaking the suspension of disbelief. So you're telling me now that a fighter who is an Eldritch Knight is going to have learnt these magical cantrips, and then they're going to level up, and then they're going to forget how to cast, I don't know, prestidigitation. They're just going to suddenly forget how to cast that, and now instead magically be able to cast, I don't know, Mage Hand. Like, it just doesn't make any narrative sense why somebody would gain that ability and then forget how to do it. It just doesn't make sense. And I wish WotC would stop with this, oh yeah, well you can just swap that out for something else because you've gained a level. Like, why? Why? Like, this idea of just changing what makes your character your character just at the drop of a hat, to me, look, I understand it from a player's perspective, I really, really do. But from a Dungeon Master's perspective, like, some of the choices that Wizards of the Coast make, and they made during the design of 5th edition, and they're continuing to make during 1D&D, is just seems to be about making the Dungeon Master's life more difficult to do their job. And it just seems to me a real shame, because actually some of the stuff that they're doing in some of these class updates and subclass updates are really, really cool. But then you just kind of to me, it kind of undermines the whole thing. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Not a fan of swapping out cantrips for the Eldritch Knight. Just not a fan. Like, save that shit for the Wizards. Right? Save that shit for the Wizards. Allow them to swap out their spells because they're wizards. Like, this guy is still a fighter. This guy is not somebody who is really well-versed in magic. Otherwise, he'd be a wizard, not a fighter. Like, let the wizards do things like that, but make the fighters stick with their choices. To me, just bad, bad, bad. Not pleased. Also, on the spellcasting focus side here, I have mixed feelings about this. I've never been a huge fan of the arcane focus anyway as a mechanism within 5th edition D&D, and I think it might have appeared in previous editions as well. Like, I like my spell components. I do. I like them. I think they're fun. I think it adds that immersion, that suspension of disbelief. So I'm not a fan of arcane's focuses anyway. So just saying that up front. But the idea of the Eldritch Knight also having an arcane focus, just like, okay, sure, make the weapon the arcane focus, fine. Make the weapon the arcane focus, that'll do. But yeah, I'm not a fan of spellcasting focuses. That's my beef. That's my beef. So it's not so much that this is a bad class feature, so much as I don't know if I like arcane focuses, guys. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not a fan. I never have been. Cool. I'm just gonna leave that there. So then obviously we have the War Bond from level 3, which was the Weapon Bond. I don't know really why they've changed it to War Bond. I'm pretty sure it was called Weapon Bond. Let me see. Eldritch Knight. Yeah, it was called Weapon Bond. Now it's called War Bond. Weapon Bond makes more sense because it is about being bonded to your weapon and that kind of, that almost spiritual relationship that a fighter can have with their weapon. But actually the function of it, the mechanics of it, remain precisely the same. So that's War Bond now, replacing Weapon Bond. Then we have War Magic here. Now, War Magic now allows you to replace one of your attacks with casting a cantrip, allowing the Eldritch Knight to weave magic into their attacks. So, if we look at the War Magic as it appeared in the 2014 Player's Handbook, it read thusly. When you, beginning at 7th level, when you use your action to cast a cantrip, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. Now it reads, when you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace one of the attacks with a casting of one of your wizard cantrips that has a casting time of an action. Now, this took me a little bit while to get my head around here, because this is all about action economy now. So before, you using your action to cast a cantrip, and then you use a bonus action to make a weapon attack. Now they've kind of turned it on its head. So when you make an attack action on your turn, you can replace one of the attacks, because you might have multiple attacks as a fighter, probably will, with the casting of one of your wizard cantrips that has a casting time of an action. So you get to cast that for free, essentially, rather than as a bonus action. So I don't know how I feel about this one, because it's definitely improvement for the player, but as I've said before, I do quite like resource management as a thing. And so if now they still have a bonus action now, as opposed to not having a bonus action like before. And I don't know. Like, I'm scratching my head on this one. I'd love to know what people think about it, so do let me know in the comments what you think if you've made it this far through the video. Because I don't know. I feel as though these things should come at a cost, personally, and maybe a free casting of a spell might be a little bit much for my personal tastes. But let me know what you think, either in the chat or in the comments section, and let me know your thoughts on that. Because I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I've got it highlighted in orange, which is like middling for me. Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. I have my grievances with it. Maybe it's a little bit too generous, but then it is a level 10 feature. So is it too generous, or was the bonus action thing too stingy before? That's my question that I'm asking. Did I say level 10? Level 7. So then at level 10 we have Eldritch Strike, which seems to remain the same, as does Arcane Charge. Those haven't changed. But then we have level 18. Now, by comparison, even though this is very, very similar to War Magic, this is now improved War Magic, I actually do like this one. So when you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace 2 of the attacks with a casting of one of your wizard spells that has a casting time of an action. Now, I do like this in comparison to what it was before. When you use your action to cast a spell, you make 1 weapon attack as a bonus action. So what this did before was, whereas before with War Magic you were limited to casting a cantrip to getting the extra weapon attack as a bonus action, with improved War Magic it was casting a full-blown spell, like a spell-slotted spell would then grant you that extra attack as a bonus action. This is kind of doing a similar thing, but basically now, instead of attacking twice, you get to cast a wizard spell. And you are level 18 at this point, which means you have spell slots going up to a 3rd level spell slot. Now this feels like a much better trade-off. Yes, okay, you still have your bonus action, sure, but now you've actually sacrificed 2 attacks to cast a spell, and you still have your bonus action, which it'll be interesting to see kind of during play how that interacts with other fighter features in terms of what grants you a bonus action or not. But certainly as the action economy goes, this feels much more balanced to me than perhaps giving them free use of a weapon attack and free use of a, well, not free use of a cantrip in that instance, but also then still having your bonus action. That felt a little bit too much. Whereas the cost of 2 attacks, yes, you still get your bonus action, but you've sacrificed 2 attacks to cast a spell. Feels much better to me. So that's it for the Eldritch Knight. I've got to say, the Eldritch Knight just too many things for me that just feel slightly off. In terms of what you can and can't do. I think I'm really getting caught up on this thing of being able to swap out cantrips and things. It just kind of has really put a stink, to quote Chris Pine from the D&D movie, just put a stink on the Eldritch Knight for me. Because I just think that's too powerful of a thing for a fighter who just happens to dabble in a little bit of magic to be able to do, of just changing up his cantrips every time he levels up. That's just too much for me. Yeah, not a huge fan of the Eldritch Knight by comparison, but if I do, I really should have done, and maybe I should do this for further episodes, this maybe do my own satisfaction scores based off of the things I've highlighted in blue versus pink and orange and things. But at a glance, certainly, I really, really like what they've done with the Battle Master. I really like what they've done with the maneuvers. I just think that is a very well put together and tweaked subclass. There was nothing wrong with the Battle Master before, particularly, but certainly the improvements that they've made definitely do feel like improvements and definitely do make the Battle Master more utilitarian, which I think is great. The champion, as you have seen live, if you've been watching this, I actually talked myself around from kind of being like, meh, to like, actually, I really, really like the champion. I really like some of the changes that they've made. I actually like this idea of just the champion just being the guy who fights with advantage all the time, which I didn't like on first reading. But as I say, you've witnessed it yourself on this video where I've just talked myself into liking it as a thing. It's really, really simplistic in design, but just makes the champion as a fighter really effective, and I really like that. In terms of the Eldritch Knight, though, to me, just a little bit meh. Not because necessarily the Eldritch Knight is a bad subclass, actually. I think it's actually a very good subclass from a player's perspective. I just don't particularly like it from a Dungeon Master's perspective, and I am a forever DM, so that is my own perspective. It just seems too generous to me. It just seems, it does just seem too generous. The only change that I like here in the Eldritch Knight is the improved war magic and what they've done to that. Everything else is either meh or nope. So, yeah, I mean, fine. It's okay. Again, I think the players will love it, but I think from a Dungeon Master's perspective, it's a thumbs down from me, actually. It just seems too generous, and some of the things just can't even be justified narratively. They're that generous in my view. So that is it for the Unearthed Arcana Playtest 7 fighter, and the subclasses. We've covered the core fighter class and indeed the new subclass, the brawler, last episode, and then we've finished off the subclasses now. Next, we're going to be looking at the barbarian next week. Well, actually, I say that talking about next week. I may not be able to do a stream next Monday. Because I have some family commitments that I have to see to. I think I will be able to, but it's not a certainty. So just keep an eye out, excuse me, on our YouTube channel. And a reminder again, if you haven't already, do make sure you hit that subscribe button and crucially that bell icon, because that's going to give you some idea as to when the next stream is going to be. Because I actually don't know. I'm hoping we're going to be able to continue with the usual schedule next week, with Monday at 12:30, so that people that are on their lunch break can join. But if not, I will put out a notification as soon as I know for sure whether that will be happening and when that will be happening. So next we'll be looking at the barbarian and the brand new barbarian subclass that is going to be coming out, or potentially coming out, as it appeared in playtest packet number 7 for the Player's Handbook. And a reminder once again, the playtest survey, which is really, really, really important that people fill out. The playtest survey comes out this week, the end of the week, I think Thursday or Friday, the 21st of September, whatever day that falls on. I don't have a calendar in front of me. But whatever day that falls on, 21st of September, you can log into D&D Beyond, log into the survey and start giving your feedback there. So we're going to obviously be moving through some of the other subclasses as well and the other classes, and giving our thoughts on those, so that you can also fill out those surveys, either based on what I'm telling you or, of course, based off your own opinions, which you may disagree with me on many things. So do let me know, actually, in the comments, what you think. If you agree with me on certain points, if you disagree with me with certain points. This is all playtest stuff, so every opinion is valid, and there have been times where I've been reading the comments, and some of the things that people have pointed out have completely changed my point of view. So do drop a comment in the comments section, and let's get a conversation going. So thanks very much, folks, for joining me at this lunchtime, and I will see you at some point next week, hopefully Monday at 12:30. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll catch you next time.